βάζουμε. Α, το βγάλανε, να σου πω, τα λάθη τα περάσανε. Ναι, έχουν βάλει την κουβερτούρα.
Να κλείσουμε τα κινητά, να αυτό το όνομα. Ενώ από... Ωραία, Πέμπτη. Και σκέτο να πεις, θα το πω εγώ, άμα πεις και σκέτο τους μεταφραστές του Ιωνίου, θα φτάνει.
Κορίτσια, ποια είναι η Ιωάννα?
Εγώ είμαι.
Εγώ είμαι η Νίνα.
Τι κάνετε?
Καλά είναι δυνατόν να μην έχω εικόνα. Τόσο καιρό τώρα δουλεύουμε μαζί και να μην έχω εικόνα. Αλλά ήταν πολύ καλό γιατί φτιάξω τα παιδιά. Είχα και απορίες. Και έτσι τώρα και η κοπελιά ξέρει τι είναι γιατί θα το συντονίσω που δουλεύει στο πλάι. Δεν ξέρω πάρα πολύ καλά τι λένε από μετάφραση. Όταν άρχισα να βαλεύω και στο πάρα πολύ ωραία. Ποια είναι η κοπέλα που θα...
Είναι 12 και 5.
Γεια σας, είναι η Νίνα Πατεράκη.
Γεια σας.
Γεια σας.
Καλημέρα, Κλεοπάτρα Λετριβιάρη. Χάρηκα πολύ.
Κλεοπάτρα, κι εγώ. Λοιπόν, χάρηκα πολύ που σε γνώρισα από μια εικόνα. Δεν είναι δυνατόν. Έχουμε μιλήσει έναν άπειρο ρυθμό ώρων στο τηλέφωνο.
Ναι, έχουμε μιλήσει πάρα πολλές ώρες επειδή τις διορθώσεις εμείς τις περνάμε τηλεφωνικά.
Ναι, γιατί είμαι εδώ. Αλλά τέλος πάντων, έχει κάνει τέτοια δουλειά προημίου. Είμαι και εγώ τόσο αποφασισμένη και κάτι.
Δεν το συζητάμε, γίνεται τσακπάμο.
Τσακπάμο.
Για αυτή τη χημεία θα μιλήσουμε σήμερα. Για αυτή τη χημεία που
χημεία. Καταρχήν η χημεία είχα γιατί έχει περάσει το πρωτοβουλίο. Χημεία είχα με τη Μαρία, την που κάναμε τον Φρόι, πάρα πολύ. Και νομίζω με σένα. Και με τη Βενετία που κάνει με τον Δάκα πολύ. Αλλά με σένα κυρίως. Με σένα κάνουμε και πολλά. Εκεί έπρεπε να σου πω για ένα φοβερό κοκτέιλ. Από τη μεριά είναι πάρα πολύ δύσκολο.
Μήπως, συγγνώμη, μήπως θέλετε να τα πείτε όταν θα είναι...
Όχι,
να κάτσετε να μας ακούσετε.
Να τα ακούνε κι άλλοι, να τα ακούνε κι άλλοι
γιατί θα είναι... Καλά, μπορεί να θα μου πει αν πρέπει.
Να κάνετε κάποια παρέμβαση.
Μιλάω για κάποιον άνθρωπο με το όνομά του και δεν ξέρω αν έχω δικαίωμα.
Μπορείτε να μην αναφέρετε το όνομα, απλά εμείς τώρα πρέπει να ξεκινήσουμε σιγά
Όχι,
σιγά.
όχι, για την Ιωάννα εννοώ.
Γιατί διάβασε το βιβλίο, σπανίως διαβάζει.
Με συγχωρείτε να σας διακόψω, γιατί πρέπει να ξεκινήσουμε. Γιατί είμαστε ήδη λιγάκι εκτός. Ναι, ευχαριστούμε πολύ. Καλή σας μέρα. Ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ που είστε σήμερα.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for being here. My name is Cleopatra Eleotriviari, and I'm representing the Pan-Hellenic Association of Graduates of the University of Translation. We're really happy to be here and to be participating in the International Book Fair of Thessaloniki and Translation Festival taking place in this context. This was an initial idea of Anthi Wittenmeyer, and we're more than happy to have her here with us today as well. We started all together 8 years ago. So this is the 8th edition of this Translation Festival in the context of the International Book Fair of Thessaloniki, and at the same time it is the 20th anniversary of our association and the institution of the International Book Fair as a whole. I am more than happy to have here with me today Miss Myrto Kalofolia, who is a colleague, a dear colleague of mine. She is a translator from the English language into the Greek language. She is also a graduate of the Ionian University. She works with English and French into Greek, and also joined by Ioanna Andreou, who is an editor and proofreader, and this is a very unique moment because this meeting today is the perfect opportunity for us three to meet in person. Ioanna and Myrto, as a matter of fact, have worked together for many years and they have seen together many works, but this is the very first time for them to meet in person here in this panel. So this is very unique moment for us all. So, before we continue with our discussion, let me tell you a few things about each one of these two panelists and how it all started for them working with translation and proofreading. So, Ioana Andreu is a proofreader. She lives in Athens and she studied history and archaeology at the National Kapodistrian University of Athens. And she has also graduated from the translation department of British Council and from the European Centre of Translation for Literature and Sciences. During the past 20 years, she has collaborated with big publishing houses such as Patakis, Metechmio, Psychoios, among others. And she has worked on books of many renowned authors such as Soti Trandafilou and Lena Divani. She has also worked as a proofreader on the translations of texts by Margaret Ursena, Virginia Woolf, Julian Barnes, Pascal Bricknay, among others. About Myrto Kalofoglia now, she is a translator as well, and she is also an author of children's books. She has studied English language and literature at the American College and translation at Ionian College, and also has postgraduate studies in cultural management in the University of Pantios. This year she was awarded for her translation for the work Nephelokokia by Anthony Dore. This is the Greek title. And both of her own books were, the proofreader of them was Ioana Andreu. Her first children's book has the title A Case of Solitudes and was awarded with the National Literature Prize. And in 2023, her second book was launched under the title Kotsida Ananas in Greek. So now let me give the floor to you. And the only thing that you need to do is to talk about what you best know how to do, about your job, about your profession. So I will begin with you first. Myrto, when you first get a book, when you receive a book for the first time from a publishing house and they ask you to translate it, what are your first thoughts and feelings? Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. It is really a great pleasure for me to be participating in this panel together with Ioana. We've seen each other online multiple times. Ioana, thank you very much for being here. It's really so important to have you here next to me. Well, it's my pleasure because this is a great opportunity for me to talk about the profession of the proofreader, which is not so widely known. Also, I want to thank you all for being here, for attending this panel today. I'm really happy to see old friends and fellow students among the audience. Now, getting back to your question, what do you want me to tell you? How I acted when I was a beginner or what I do now? So when I first started, every single time that someone proposed a book to me, of course I said yes. Yeah, they may asked me, but in reality I had no choice, and this went on for many years to come. Even if I had my second thoughts whether this is a book for me or not, the truth is that I didn't really feel free to reject that. But as years went by, nowadays I am lucky enough to have, at least to a limited extent, the freedom to choose the books that I translate. So concerning the methods that I follow, the first thing that I do is the author, what they have written about, what kind of style they have followed, whether there is reference to previous works of this author as well. Also, I do some research concerning the reviews that this book has received. And if there are other works of the same author that have already been translated, of course, I also go through these editions as well, so as to have a general overview. And despite the fact that I usually haven't got enough time to read it from cover to end, I try at least to have read a big part of the book until before I begin translating. And then the journey begins, because I always have to do research concerning idiomatic expressions, some cultural elements, and create a pool of people to whom I could address, whether in case I needed some help, for example, or some clarification. And these are only few parts of the process of research that I am required to do. I usually also take down notes on certain words, terms, as I said, special phrases and expressions. After you have started translating, it might take a few pages, so to say, but then you gain pace, and it takes some flow, it adopts some flow, and it goes on a little bit more easily. So while I am translating, I usually use two highlighters. I use a certain color for special expressions that drew my attention, and probably this might mean that although I have translated a term already, maybe I'm not totally satisfied with it, so I will need to get back to that. And the second color means that even if I have done some research on the topic, probably I also need to get back again and go a little bit more thoroughly. When I finish the translation, I read it through again, and this is an extremely important part of the process because it is the first correction, the first editing of the text. And I pay particular attention onto the first pages because it is when you are only beginning and probably it doesn't come out as naturally yet. And also I pay a lot of attention on the final pages because you have to take care of the end of it. It has to be a good end. And then I send it to the publisher. So I send it back to the publisher, and before I do so, I have already contacted them, and I now ask for Ioanna's proofreading in specific. So that's what I do. However, in previous years, I couldn't do that. Because it was the publishing house that would decide who is going to do the proofreading for my book. Now, however, I feel completely confident and safe when I know that my text will be edited by Ioanna. Yes, I think that all of the things that you have already mentioned are extremely important and interesting for the people that don't know in specific what the process is. So you get the title of the book, you get the book, you start working, and after you finish, you send your text back to the publishing house, and the publishing house is the one who is going to choose who is going to do the proofreading. Is that right? Well, yes, but let me tell you something on that. I have to confess. So it's not only the Gregorians that will be aware of that. You're going global today because today we are also having simultaneous interpreting into English for the international audience who is attending those meetings online. So, getting back to our topic, I remember that I once were working with a very difficult text. It was very challenging for me, and I constantly felt that I had left things pending. And for this reason, I contacted Ioanna directly, and I asked for her help. So I before sending my end product to the publisher, I had already contacted myself, like personally, Ioanna, and I asked for her help and advice. I did that because I really had enjoyed this work. It was a very interesting book, but it was challenging at the same time. However, I can imagine that all of this happened after you had already worked for many years and there was a relationship of trust between the two of you. Is that right? So, Joanna, now let me give the floor to you. Going back, do you remember how it was the first time that when you received a text of Mirto for the first time? What was this first communication like? So what did you do? What kind of steps did you follow? And when did you finally come into contact with Mirto herself? Well, since you're mentioning that, and since we're talking about the very first time that we communicated, this was about 5 years ago or more. It was the beginning of 2019. She wanted to go through an editing process on the text before I started with my proofreading. And when we first talked to each other, I remember that we tried to use a very formal tone while we were talking because we didn't know each other. At some point, however, I told her that there's no need for us to be using such a formal tone. Let me ask you something. Was it this thing after you had already worked for some period of time? No, we had not started our collaboration officially yet. So my idea was that there's no need for us to be talking in such a formal tone. And she said that if you are to hold grudges against me, then maybe formal tones are totally redundant. So, now about the steps of this process. So what is proofreading about? Let me briefly explain to you. I'll try to be concise. In proofreading, what I do is to spot and correct typos, grammar errors, maybe issues of style or content in some cases. This is an important part of this job. It looks a little bit as if I am a teacher who is correcting a student's essay, for example. At the same time, however, a proofreader needs to double-check terminology, semantics, whether what is being said is actually true or not, the translation or transliteration of names, whether it all makes sense, whether there is a consistent timeline in the narrative, whether there are things that make sense in terms of context, political context or historical context, and especially when it comes to authors that have written a text in Greek and for the Greek audience. Also, we check for repetitions. And when it comes to a translated text, one thing that we always need to double check is whether certain things have been rendered correctly, if the style follows also the style of the author. Also, we double check always whether certain parts, entire chunks have been omitted just because they didn't notice. Another very common thing is Anglicisms and this phenomenon in which usually things are translated directly word by word from one language to another. And another thing that we need to check is whether any footnotes are necessary, because in some cases things need to be explained to the Greek audience. So these are only a few things about proofreading. So we're talking about spelling, punctuation, misspellings, and many other things. So actually a proofreader does a little bit of everything. So you double check and you correct at the same time. You do both jobs at the same time. About the process now. Once I receive the text from the publishing house, usually in a Word file, the very first thing that I do is to clear the text out from typos or spelling errors, double spaces, commas, punctuation. It may happen. It's something that happens very commonly. And some particularities that are specifically demanded by the publishing house, for example. I think that the first part of interventions that you mentioned is about authors that have written in Greek. So we're talking about original texts written in the Greek language. Yes, especially when it comes to time consistency, or things that are constantly repeated. Yes, these are about texts that have been originally written in the Greek language. And then the rest of the things are also applicable to translated texts. So proofreading takes place at 3 different phases. In the first one, I clear out the text from these errors, and then on a second level, I have some interventions. I point out my changes, and I always add a remark on that, because it is always necessary to get back to it at some point, and I always want to have an overview of the text and the changes. And another reason why I do that is not only for myself, but also because maybe the publisher would like to send the text with these corrections and these changes back to the translator. So, what do you mean to say by that? Do you mean to say that in some cases maybe the translator is not being made aware of those changes? Well, if it is only about spelling mistakes and typos, maybe not, but things that I consider important and I think that the translator also needs to be aware of, I always include them on a separate note. So, what do I do next? Usually I have my Word file and my PDF file with the original text, and it helps me compare and contrast the 2 texts. Also, another question here. Do you usually read the original book beforehand? Or do you immediately begin with your proofreading? No, the truth is that I usually do not read the original book. I need to go through the translated text with the critical viewpoint of a demanding Greek reader. So when I am given a title of a book, I will do some basic research online and read the reviews about the book, but that's all about it. I am particularly interested in the translated text. So from that point on, I start reading the Greek text again, and I see if there is enough correspondence between the two texts. And the truth is that, as Mirto mentioned before, in the beginning it goes a little bit more slowly, but later on you gain pace and then you move on a little bit more naturally. So if it is a person that I have worked with many times before, this is very helpful because I can recognize the style of theirs. But if it is a new person, a translator that I have never worked with before, I need to take slower steps. So this is the second stage. Once we finish with that, it means that I have included remarks concerning certain points that could be corrected or improved. I also copy-paste the original text and the corresponding passage, and then I add my remarks. Once I finish, I go back to the translator. So that's the first things. Getting back to your question, usually I don't read the original text beforehand, as I said, but it is rather common today for Mirto and I to talk on the phone before we begin and to exchange views and opinions about the book. And this communication is very helpful to me because I am prepared about what I'm going to read.
10 ετών plus.
So I remember when we started working with the book Julie and the Shark, there are some parts in the text that are not prose, but poetry. But this poetic style, this verse, I didn't want it to make the text look like an adult book. I wanted, this was a children's book, by the way, so I tried to use verse which would remain loyal to the target group, to 10-year-olds. This might sound like a small detail to you, but it is of extreme importance when you want to really be close to your audience, and it is a very useful piece of information for the proofreader to know those things beforehand.
There is no translation that has done the absolute translation. In the past 20 years, I have worked with many of them, and even the most detailed and perfect works and translators that have been working for years can make mistakes. It means that whatever she writes down for me, I take it into consideration, regardless the fact if I agree or not. And here in the audience, there are some translators that have worked with Ioanna. I don't know whether you have any questions. Maybe after our conversation. So this is the next stage. The translator replies. Then I send it back to the publisher to go on with publishing. The graphic artist will prepare it, and I think that when I see it in on paper, it is the best stage because the text is clear from all the typos, and I already know the the text, and I can see other shades that I couldn't see in the first stage. So on the PDF, I do copy paste on any problems that may occur. Could you please explain this? I put my corrections on paper, but whatever doubt I have, I should talk to the translator. So I can write on the PDF. She can't see all of my corrections at the first stage, but she knows about everything. She doesn't care if I change one insignificant word. She cares about the sense, and she sends back the replies, and I put that onto paper. I send it back to the graphic artist, to the publisher, and then the third time I receive this on paper, I should put it in contrast. And this is where I would like to highlight the role of the graphic artist, because he can really simplify your work, but he can even turn it into a very difficult task. I think you have something in mind since you're laughing. It has happened in many corrections to find a difference and to see everything again due to a mistake of the graphic artist. Of course, you can make a mistake. I would like to ask you, since we saw it into your resume as well, your CV, that you have studied translation as well. Do you think that all this knowledge you have gained and your studies, does it help your work as an editor, or is it an obstacle to your work? Do you have this tendency, to become a translator instead of the translation? Do you have any clear boundaries? For me, the translation studies were a really important aid to approach even better the texts, to see what the work of the translation was, what the tricks they used were, and what traps does the text may include, and how the translator managed to deal with them. Because this is what you get to learn in translation studies. They make you translate parts so you can learn this in practice. It's not only about theory. Yes, because through practice you can understand what you should do. It has helped a lot. I do not have the ambition to become a translator, because otherwise I would be. And I'm not a writer, so I would not intervene in a text of a Greek writer just because I want to. And I don't want to go into the process of overcorrection, because some editors do that. Yes, okay, I could do better than the translator. If something is correct and it serves the style of the writer, there is no need for you to change it. the most you can do is, if you have a brilliant idea, you can write a note for the translator, and that's it. Mirto, why is Ioanna the editor you want to collaborate again and again with? What is that that makes your collaboration stronger, and how do you think Ioanna is protecting your job? She has an excellent linguistic instinct, and I talked about it again yesterday. But this is it. She has a great sense of the balance of the sentence and of the text as a whole. So, whatever word she thinks that it does not fit, she will understand it. She works into deep detail, and this is why I trust her, because I know that it will be improved. You will have the final text. You will not have anything pendant. And I'm not talking about typos that a proofreader should check. We talk about the style and characteristics. For example, we are waiting for a great project, a big project, a saga of 890 words. There is a woman who speaks normally, but when she's upset, she uses a dialect, and the problem we are talking about now is that if we put her into speaking in two different ways, it will seem to the reader that the error is ours. Either we will use a lower register and a slighter dialect in the parts where she speaks, or we should have a different approach. You can understand this is what makes Ioanna a very important editor. And I hadn't detected that while I was translating. She did. This is what she said, but this is how we should put it, but we are going to find a solution. It is important, I think, from my experience, you dive into the text, and it is really important to give the text to a third reader, a third editor, that he knows what he does. It is really important because, as you said, this was a part that you couldn't see, but she did. Do you have any other examples that you would like to discuss? A ping pong game between you that was really challenging? I wouldn't say it was challenging, but running through the texts, we have worked together. We had found, for example, in one text, in Cloud Cuckooland, there used to be in a classroom, a school classroom, a small sign that in English was the past perfect and future walked into a bar. It was tense. In English, it is really great, but translated into Greek, word by word, it doesn't make any sense. And the translation in Greek had a kind of a joke. Of course, you can't translate it word by word, but we kept on trying to find what other expressions of that kind we could use that had this joke. So we chose another expression in Greek that was really nice, and it was funny because a school teacher, a high school teacher, would be pretty as well. So this was just a phrase on a book. The reader won't pay attention to this. No one is going to talk about this. But we had wasted much time trying to find the best solution, because one word for us can take up many days even. I used to wake up in my sleep to try to find a solution. Many of our colleagues laugh in the audience because they understand, especially Cloud Cuckooland had really haunted me. And it's important to have a great title, because when we connect with one text, it has a direct result on the quality of our work. And here I would like to add, by the way, and I have asked Myrto to talk about it, I would like to mention an email that she sent to me when we talked about Cloud Cuckooland, because she had talked about it like a great book I am translating, and please find time to edit it. And when she finished, she said, "I'm crying now as it goes to the end, because this writer loves its characters, and the important part in this book is love. And this is really the small print of the book, and we should talk about it, that there is too much love. In general, there is love between us and love for our job, and Myrto talked to me with love about Ioana Andreu, and when I asked her, do you want to talk to someone in the International Book Fair? I didn't know about Ioana then. I asked her if she could propose someone, and she said, of course, Ioana Andreu. And I think that, and I'm really touched that we are here now today. I am really moved. I am a translator. I know many parts of this job, but it's really interesting for me to see how do the two colleagues work, and this small print is really exciting and fascinating about me. And at this point, I will share a secret with you. I didn't know if it is happening, but sometimes the translators, when they work, can hide in the books they translate a very small, a tiny word that means something to them and to others that nobody will understand. Just a tiny thing, that might have a special meaning to someone, like enabling to someone. So I found out, talking to them, that they have something like this, but they are going to talk about it.
Yeah, this is that little trick of Myrto, and I show respect to that. Um, it is something which was repeated again and again, and initially I couldn't really understand what was going on, but then I realized. So in the beginning, when I started first to translate books, there were those book reviews, and there was a female critic that was about to write a review for a book that she didn't like at all. So her review was negative for the book and negative for the translation as well. So this was a very sad thing for me. It was my initial steps of my career. So she wrote a very negative review for my translation. The truth is that I was deeply hurt by it. And ever since, I have been using in all of my translations all of those words that this particular book critic hated. And this is my little trick. Okay, well, the truth is that we haven't got much time left, and we need to keep some time, to save some time to have a short discussion with the audience. Before that, however, I want to read to you the reasoning for the National Literature Prize that Myrto was awarded with, because it is the absolute proof of that exquisite work that these two ladies have been doing. Uh, okay, before that, let me tell you something. A bad text or a bad translation can, in a way, be a little bit improved by a proofreader. But a good text can really become perfect with the help of a proofreader. So, yes, the contribution of a proofreader is important indeed, but if you have good material in your hands, then you're talking about something else. The second thing that I want to mention is that as proofreaders, we are usually invisible and maybe a little bit unrecognized. Yes, the truth is that this is also the case with translators, but with proofreaders even more. And this happens often enough because of the publishing houses. And also let me add that the way in which a publishing house communicates and behaves towards the translator and the proofreader can also have an impact on the final result. So for all of this, I really want to thank all of those translators, Myrto first of all, and all of the other translators that I have worked with, that when given the opportunity, they always mention our names and our work. They never miss a chance to talk about what we do as well, and thank you very much for that. Thank you. I totally agree with all of this. I always tend to say that proofreading is not a luxury, because the truth is that many people do not pay enough attention onto this. And I'm talking about publishers. Thank you very much both for being here and for sharing all of this with us. It's really important for us all as readers to see how beautiful this relationship of yours has grown, and the importance of and how important trusting relationship is between two professionals like you for the final outcome. Now, before moving on with the Q&A, please let me read the reasoning of the awarding of a National Literature Prize to Myrto to you. So, Cloud Cuckooland by Anthony Doerr is a modern book that has been written by an author who is a virtuoso of the language and the plot line. Translating this book is really challenging and demanding. Myrto Kalofolia managed to rise to the occasion, and she created a beautiful translation, very rich linguistically, and you never realize that it is an actual translation. The speech that Doerr used has got many elements of poetry, and the translator has managed to use this verse in a perfect way and to make use of the most appropriate linguistic equivalents that can take the reader into a solid narrative universe. Her creative approach gave literary work that feels as if it is an original text. More specifically, translating such a work requires a lot of factual investigation on many different levels, talking about very complicated things such as grenades or irrigation systems. And it is a structured novel that consists of parallel stories that take place at the same time in different environments and eras, from the 15th century on till the distant future, and the characters are very heterogeneous, belonging to different environments as well. So the translator has used her language in a corresponding way according to the era and the environment, using the language in a very convincing way to give voice to the main characters. And she manages to create a very distinct style for each character while maintaining the narrative style of the author. It's also very interesting the fact that there are some excerpts of an old ancient manuscript where the translator has used linguistic findings that give folk sense in this text with humorous elements. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here. If you have got any questions to our two guests, please, the floor is yours.
Η κυρία Δήμητρα Δότση.
Dimitra Dotsi is here among the audience. It's a great honor to have you here. Hello. All the things that we heard from you today sound absolutely perfect. The kind of relationship that has developed between the two of you usually takes a lot of years for other people to conquer. I have a question for Myrto. Until you got to meet her for the first time and until you developed this relationship with her, I can imagine that you also had some more disappointing experiences, so to say. Would you like to share something about it? Because now it all looks like too good to be true, and the truth is that I am also very lucky myself to have been working long time now with another proofreader that I admire deeply, and in many cases I choose that she does the proofreading of my texts. However, until I got here, I had my disillusionments, my negative moments, so to say. So what about you? Yes, I did have some unpleasant experiences. First of all, for many years, I had no clue that proofreaders could actually contact me and we could communicate directly with one another. The very first time that this happened was with Ioana. Many times my books were edited by people that I probably already knew, but it was something that happened very randomly. And I do remember one case in which at some point I received my text back after the proofreader's interventions, and I couldn't really relate with any of the remarks. And this was very tiring for me because it required more time for me to read it through again, see what the corrections were, and in many cases they were off completely, and that would mean that I had to explain everything to this person again. I tried to be as kind as possible, but as you can imagine, this was very consuming for me. I didn't ever work again with this proofreader. Another case is that at some point I felt completely exposed because my text had already been sent to a proofreader, but many mistakes were still there, and I actually sent my final product to the publisher with many errors because the proofreader had not done the job properly. And how can you save a book from a bad proofreader? Well, it's not very easy to do that because one has to notice first. And this cannot happen very easily because usually publishers totally trust their proofreaders. In big publishing houses, probably the book before it goes out is read by someone else as well. Otherwise, there is no hope. The only thing that you can do if you do detect some omissions, you need to contact the publisher directly and let them know about what is happening. But in big publishing houses, on the other hand, there isn't enough time for all of this. There are publishers that only have one stage of proofreading and no second or third. What I know is that probably there are cases in which people ask you to do all of this work extremely quickly. When Cloud Cuckoo Land was out on the market, the only thing that I did was sit down and read the book from the beginning to the end again. And I spotted actually some things that I decided that needed to be rendered differently, and we changed them in the second edition. In some other cases, this has already been done before the first edition, before the first printing. Okay, well, thank you very much for this most interesting discussion. I think that we need to leave the room because there is another meeting going to take place right afterwards, but you can find Mirto and Ioanna in the stand of our association nearby. And see you tomorrow. We are going to talk with Olga Castro.